Welcome to the What Good Looks Like podcast, where we shine the spotlight on organizations and leaders who are truly living out what it means to champion the message and the work of purpose in the marketplace today. I'm your host, Davin Salvagno.
Hey, Mike, do you really think that you can grow $1 billion brand and do all this loving people stuff? And I was like, wait a second, we're going to build $1 billion brand because we're doing all of this people stuff. That's the switch I want to make in the world.
Welcome back to the What Good Looks Like podcast. Today, I am here with Mike McFall, the other co-founder and CEO of Biggby Coffee. He is also the author of the book Grind, fantastic business book, and the author of the upcoming book Grow, which is the second book out of 3 that he has planned. I'm super excited to spend time with Mike and with you guys today. I had the opportunity to spend time with Mike at Biggby Nation Summit over the summertime. It was fantastic. And I know that last week we talked with Bob and Michelle Fish, and you heard a little bit about the beginning of the Biggby Coffee story. But today we're really going to get into deep behind the purpose of Biggby and why it's truly a great example of what good looks like. Mike, thank you for being here today. Loving the background, you got so much going on right there.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's great to be here. Someday I'll tell you a story about my golf towel and kind of relates to my background, but that's a tangent.
Well, that'll have to be either on another episode or we'll have to do something in person to really understand that story. That's great. But for those of you who are listening, you can't see, you could watch this on YouTube and you could see, but if you're listening right now, there's a lot of color going on in the background. There's some antique typewriters and recording material, and he's probably got the most epic sports coat on that I've ever seen. I need to get one of those. Mike, thank you for being here today. Listen, I am so enamored with the work that you're doing at Biggby Coffee, because it truly, I'm holding a cup in my hand that says we love the people behind our coffee even more. It says we love our coffee, but we love the people behind our coffee even more. And I could tell you, for those of you who are listening, that's true. I've experienced that in person. I've experienced it at their annual conference. I've experienced it in their stores. I've spent some time specifically with Mike, and they exude this. So let's talk about the foundation of Biggby, how it all began, your involvement in the story, and then we'll get into the deep purpose.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to be here too. It was, just a pleasure to get to know you and just find out how amazingly aligned we are in terms of our approach to business and to the world. And so that's always refreshing. And again, thanks for having me. I think the founding story of Biggby is it's a fairly traditional founding story. And we my business partner Bob Fish came out of the high volume restaurant business, had always been enamored with coffee, grew up in Europe, wanted to bring specialty coffee to the United States and do it in a way that was very efficient and productive. And like I said, he was incredibly good at running restaurants. And really, when I look at our founding, one of the things that made us so powerful in the marketplace is that we weren't running cute, quaint coffee shops. We were running high volume restaurants where the product we were serving happened to be a cup of coffee as opposed to a plate of eggs and pancakes. And so that mentality was the foundation of our business. And I got involved as a barista. I worked the morning shift at our first store. We had one store at that point. Bob was working on a second store and was looking for some people to help him manage that, and approached me about whether I'd be interested in becoming a manager. I was at the university in East Lansing, Michigan State, and I was preparing to go back to the graduate school. And Bob and I sat down. I didn't have a high degree of interest in becoming making that my full-time gig, and so but we sat down, we talked. It was a beautiful spring day, March 1997, and we popped up and went for a walk, because it was just, it was one of those days where it was like the first you could smell spring, And so we got up, we went for like a 4-hour walk around East Lansing. And by the end of that walk, we shook hands. And I know this sounds fantasional, but we shook hands and agreed to start a company together. And you have to remember, we didn't know each other that well, because I worked the morning shift, he worked the evening shift in the store, and it was really one of the first times we'd spent any real time together. And so we shook hands, and a lot of the stuff that we covered in that 4 hour walk was aspirational, and we had very similar backgrounds. We really aligned on so many things, and so that handshake was a big deal, right? That handshake was, and the next morning I called the professor I worked for at the university, resigned, and threw myself 100% at Biggby. And it sounds crazy, but really at the end of the day, we didn't form the company for about 15 months. And then we formed it in 1998, and I threw myself at it, and we worked hard to get the business going. And it was a very long, very slow process. And we had 2 stores at that point. Then we got in 1998, we decided to get into franchising. We made that decision, and then we threw ourselves at the development of a franchise company. And as they say, the rest is history. But the company truly was founded on a handshake, and I love that part of our story. And it's amazing. Here we are, 26 years later, and we're still doing the same thing. We're still waking up, and we're still doing the same stuff, meaning developing the brand, and trying to grow a great company.
It's such a great story. And I mean, it's almost a fairy tale story. This idea of 2 people working together, go for a 4-hour walk around town, share life stories, philosophize, share business values, and then end it with a handshake that starts not just one coffee shop, but turns into a franchise of over 300. And I know that there's a massive vision ahead to grow that number to 600 to 800 to 1,000. There's an incredible movement that's being led behind it. And what's amazing is that it's not just a coffee shop. It's a community. It truly is. And I know why you call it Biggby Nation Summit, right? Because there is almost kind of this, in a good way, allegiance to the brand, because of how the brand is changing the lives of the people it touches, not just the customers, but the people who work there, the franchisees, the baristas. I love your purpose behind Biggby, of helping you build the life that you love. And that's not some cheap marketing slogan. It honestly is the essence of what it is that you're doing in the business that you're in. It's about helping people build the lives that they love. Coffee just happens to be the vehicle that you're using to do that. So I want to know, like, when did that happen? When did it go from awesome, we're gonna get into business together, we're gonna shake hands, we're gonna start this, we're gonna franchise it, to wait, this is about so much more than coffee?
Well, I was probably in fall of 2014, spring of 2015. Bob and I had been doing a lot of navel gazing around what the heck are we doing here? And we were very fortunate to be in a position at that point where the company had a solid foundation built, and I think we both felt good about sort of our financial futures and so on. But we started to lose inspiration, and showing up to work is like, really, is this really about adding another zero to our income statement, or bolstering our balance sheet? And so with that consideration went on for a couple of years. No, it was a long time that we were talking about it, and we had all kinds of different ideas. And what happened for me personally, though, was I'll never forget where I was. I know exactly where I was sitting and who was in the room, and I realized, it dawned on me that the people in that room were some of my primary relationships in the world. And I had never thought that way before. I had always just had, business was business, and we were growing a business, we were growing a company. And then I had my life, and I had my primary relationships, and I had my friends and family and so on. But when I looked around the room and there's people there, well, Bob is one, of course, right? Bob's one of my most intimate relationships that I have in the world. But then, I'm looking around the room and there's people that have worked there for 10, 12, 15 years. And I love these people. And when that hit me, it was a really powerful moment. And I said it to the group. And I'd always had this reservation around becoming close to people because I always felt like I knew that, or I always believed that at some point I was going to have to make a decision that would put those people into turmoil, sell the company, they report to somebody else. Well, once I realized, and this is where conscious capitalism and Nathan Havey come in, once I realized that I didn't have to make that decision. There was no, it wasn't a set in stone that an entrepreneur has to build a company up and then liquidate it, sell it, and move on. Like that's one version of a story, but it doesn't have to be my version of the story. And so then we had a moment where Bob and I were in the midst of this. I'd already had that epiphany, and I went camping on South Manitou Island with my 9-year-old and my younger brother, who's my best friend, one of my best friends. My two brothers are my best friends, and so we were camping. It was just the three of us, and we had walked around the island. It's a pretty big island. It's about a 9-mile walk around the island, and we were at the farthest, most remote part of the island on the beach. And I looked over, and there is a man and a woman hovering over a camp stove making tea. And I remember looking at them and just I had this just feeling of like contentment and joy and peace and so on. Okay, so that's it. I move on. We finish our hike. That night, we're at South Manitou Island. There's communal fire pits for like 4 campsites, and we're up making dinner. And that couple walks up to join us at the fire pit. And we introduce ourselves. I'm hanging out with my 9-year-old, and so my brother engages the man in a conversation, and he starts talking about his work as a consultant in conscious capitalism. And he's going off, right? he's lighting it up, and if you know Nathan, I know Nathan very, very well now. If you know Nathan, he can light it up, and so he was on a roll, and I didn't say anything. And the next morning, I handed him my business card as we were on the ferry boat going back to Leland. And I said, hey, I'd love to learn more about your work. And then that kicked off this unbelievable transition in our company, where Nathan became a consultant of ours, working us through purpose, working us through vision. And he's lovingly referred to as the shaman from the woods, right? And it's true, though. I met the guy in the woods, and just that, these stories, I don't know if I was listening to that story. I'm not sure I believe it, but I swear it's true. And so then we really dove into purpose and then what that was going to be for us, and how that was going to manifest and so on.
So good. And I had a chance to meet Nathan, and what a phenomenal guy he is. I love both of these stories. I love the founding walking story with Bob, and then this island moment that you had with Nathan. You can't make this stuff up. Like I said, it sounds like a fairy tale, but it's true. And I really love what you said there about, people have this mindset that becoming an entrepreneur, you have to create a business, you have to scale it up, put a bunch of zeros behind it, flip it, and then ride off into the sunset into something that's next. And that's one version of a story, but it doesn't have to be your version. And as you started to talk about, the people that you looked around the room and that you love, I started to even think, I'm here in our office here at Purpose Point, and on the other side of this camera, I'm staring at a big conference table with a bunch of empty seats that normally would hold our team in it. And I started to think to myself, could I imagine a life without them? And the answer is no, I couldn't. And so the idea of taking something and flipping it and moving on to whatever's next as an entrepreneur, I certainly can't see that as my story. And I would imagine that must have been the very same for you in that room, looking around at everyone that you love and saying, what am I doing this for? And can I imagine a life without these amazing people that I get to do this with? And how many more can we invite into this room? And how much more impact can we make? And how much more of a difference can we make together? And, where's the sky on this thing? That had to be an amazing moment.
It was really impressive. I remember, I remember crying in that moment, because it was such a relief to let go of this concept that I was going to have to hurt these people someday. If I followed that traditional path of scale, liquidate, become a millionaire, and move on and leave them in the wake, right? And when I realized that didn't have to be the end of the story, it was like a weight came off. It just a weight came off. So that was powerful. And then here we are. I mean, now it's been 7 years since that moment, and we've been in it. We really have, and tearing into it as aggressively as we can. And I love the work we do today.
So good. So good. Talk to me, and I want to get into your work as an author here in a little bit, especially your next book, Grow, which is awesome. But before we get there, how did you take now this realization that you had that's in your head and your heart as an entrepreneur, right? The foundation was there, right? You had started a business. Obviously, your first book, Grind, is all about kind of that foundation. Now you have this moment where you say, you know what? We don't have to scale this thing traditionally to the point where, we have to sacrifice our relationships with our people for a business case of selling this thing as an entrepreneur and hurting them one day. This can be something completely different. This can be something special. There's a deeper purpose here that we can dive into and be a part of together. How did that move from your head and your heart into the lives of all of the other people that were in that room and everyone else who was a part of Biggby at that time, who maybe just saw it as a traditional business?
Well, I think, I think in our core, we had this, Bob and I had this, and I got asked a really interesting question. I think it was last week. And, I think the initial stage for me, the grind stage, I was acting, and I was doing what I thought you had to do to be a successful entrepreneur. And so really in the end, transitioning out of that sort of hyper aggressive, you've got a big wall built up between you and the people in the business, and you're striving for a liquidity event, that whole thing, that whole entrepreneurial ethos. I actually feel like I transitioned. When I transitioned out of that, I transitioned into my more authentic self and who I want to be in the world. Right. And so, and somebody asked me the question, like, do you think you can build a company? If you had the mentality you have today and you started a company, do you think you could build such a successful company? Or do you need to be that entrepreneurial ethos to make it happen? And I would love for somebody to take that on as a research project, at a university, because I don't know, like I look back and sometimes today I advocate things that I would never have done back in year 3 or year 4. And had I done them, would it have worked? And I can't definitively say yes to that question. Right. So that's an internal struggle I have, but I do feel like, and I'm super happy now today that I can live in the space that feels way more authentic, where it's about nurturing people, taking care of people, loving people, and growing a heck of a business. I mean, don't ever think that we're not in this to grow one heck of a company, because we're planning on it. In fact, I got, I'm sorry, I'll defer back to you.
No, go ahead. Say what you're going to say.
Well, I was on a podcast, and it was a good interview, and I thought that we were pretty well aligned, and I thought the guy was pretty understanding what the heck we're up to. And then he closes with a question, and he says, Hey, Mike, do you really think that you can grow $1 billion brand and do all this loving people stuff? And I was like, wait a second, we're going to build $1 billion brand because we're doing all of this people stuff. Right. And that's that switch that you just can't. That's the switch I want to make in the world. That's the transition in thinking that I hope my work can grow, and being with people like you and hanging out with people like you, that we can do that.
So good. That may have been my favorite sound clip of maybe any episode this season, is exactly what you just said. No, wait a minute. We're going to create $1 billion brand because of all of this loving people stuff. It's not a trade-off. It's not one or the other. People think that, well, wait a minute, I can love people and we can sing Kumbaya and this entire thing is ministry and nonprofit and, all this good stuff. But the sacrifice of that is I can't be this $1 billion brand entrepreneur. And the reality is that is a lie. It's a falsehood. If you do this really, really, really well, if you've got a really good business model that's already profitable and scalable, which Biggby is, and the foundation of that is loving people and helping them build the lives that they love, and you continue to scale that, the $1 billion brand is inevitable. So
I
good.
love that. Yeah. It's the fundamental premise of conscious capitalism,
So
which
good.
is that you have 6 stakeholders, one of which is the shareholder, and then there's the other 5, right? Vendors, employees, community, environment, right? And you make decisions where no one sacrifices. And that's the idea, is that and it's not zero sum, right? In the past, since the early 70s, it was you made decisions for the shareholder, period. Everything was like, and that's the beauty of the conscious capitalism movement is it's not zero sum. Everybody wins. It can be difficult, right, at times to not make trade-offs, but at the end of the day, I would much rather have the work of having to make decisions where you don't have trade-offs than having to make a decision where I put people in turmoil.
So good. So good. It's so appropriate that the title of your second book is called Grow, because I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of noise around grind, and I'm not talking about your book Grind. I'm talking about the mentality of grind, right? Just hustle harder, right? Leave a wake of people in your path as long as it leads to results. Grind. And I'm not saying that's the essence of your book. That's the essence of how the world approaches grind. And what you've done is you've been able to transcend that mindset and say, no, that's a very fixed mindset. There's a growth mindset here that is much, much, much more powerful. In fact, I almost equate it to, we've got 2 kids, and when they were younger, they used to watch Monsters Inc. Right. And there was the whole, show is about converting fear into power. And then at the very, very end, they find out that laughter was 10 times more powerful than fear. And I almost feel like that's the analogy here, is that traditional entrepreneurism, traditional capitalism, traditional grind fixed mindset mentality, could it lead to producing power? Yeah. But growth mindset, loving people, looking at this from a human perspective is like the laughter. It's 10 times more powerful. And so talk to us about your second book, Grow, because I love that it really encapsulates this entire mindset that you have now arrived at and are now leading at Biggby.
Well, I think the grind phase of development of a business is simply from the minute you commit to the business to your first day of positive cash flow. And so it's a very finite and small period of time. And I do think when a business is negative cash flowing, there is a different intensity level.
Yes.
Right? You're fighting for survival.
Yes.
So then where grow picks up is when you're takes the bootstrapping entrepreneur and you go through this arc as a leader. And the arc is you go from bootstrapping to developing as a leader of teams and of people. But then the ultimate the ultimate eventuality there is that you transition and then you become irrelevant as the entrepreneur. And that takes an extraordinary amount of growth as a human being. So you go from bootstrapping entrepreneur to leader. That's a difficult transition for a lot of entrepreneurs to make, right? But then that next transition from leader of an organization to what I call irrelevance. And by irrelevance, it means you still own the company, you're still active, you're still involved, but you've built the team to such a degree that you are irrelevant to that organization thriving. And to be able to do that, and that's part of where Bob and I are right now, is that we have people like John Gilkey and the team he's building running the company day to day. Well, I'll tell you what, that is a difficult transition to make. Your phone stops ringing, people aren't calling you for your opinion. And so, but at the end of the day, now if you can pull that off, now you have a sustainable enterprise that you can. It makes you incredibly more powerful because you don't have to do something like a liquidity event. You can if you want to. And by the way, it makes the company way more valuable to sell if it's got a full-on professional team running it. That makes it infinitely easier to sell with a higher valuation. or you can just keep going and be involved in the organization in the ways that you want to be, right? And the ways that the team thinks you should be. And so that's the real arc and transition. And like I said, it's a difficult transition to make. And then the other meaning for grow is when you're a bootstrapping entrepreneur, you got to grow the thing. Like you really do. And I'm not I love that part of my work, right? Growing a business and expanding and getting better. I had a student ask me this semester. She said, "What's this obsession with growth for entrepreneurs? Like, why is entrepreneurialism about growth? And why is it always about generating more revenue and more dollars and so on?" And it took me back. I didn't answer the question right away. I took a few days, and then at my next class, I what I'd figured out was that, you know what, it's not about growth. It's not about revenue growth. What it's about, in my opinion, for most entrepreneurs, is it's about improving. And it's about getting better at what you do. And you're fueled to get better and better and deliver a better product, to become world-class at delivering the value that you bring to the consumer. And you, as entrepreneurs, you want to get better at that, better at that, better. The end result of that obsession of improvement is revenue growth, because you're getting better at doing the work and you're getting better at the product and delivery and marketing and so on. So like that to me is the premise of the book is that we need to build how you can make that transition from bootstrapping entrepreneur all the way through to irrelevance. Is you have to build environments where people thrive, where they come to work. It is an environment for them to be personally developing. When they come to work and they go home at night, they're more inspired, they're more invigorated than when they came in the morning. And I think, and if I can just lean into this idea of billion-dollar brand because we're doing these things, 78% of employees in America are actively disengaged or disengaged. 78%. Now, if we can build environments where people come into work and they're healthy environments, they're nurturing, they're supportive. Think of in a speech I gave, I called it the biggest productivity hack since the microprocessor, which is if we can, let's just say we can transition half of those people, half of the 78%, from disengaged or actively disengaged into engaged or actively engaged. Think of the productivity improvement in corporate America. And it's not about that. I mean, it's not 100% about just making the company better and improving productivity and so on. But what I'm saying is that it all works together, like and so that's grow. Grow is about building that kind of environment where you're building powerful teams and environments that are healthy and productive. And it's hard to summarize the 320 pages, but that's pretty much it.
So good. So good. And what I love about what you just said there, when you think about growth, I mean, there was so much to unpack. That was a powerful segment that you just did a masterclass, quite frankly, on the right way to approach entrepreneurism. Because I think if we were to go back and look at the founding entrepreneurs, like way before our time, before entrepreneurism was a thing, they all didn't look and say, I want to be an entrepreneur. No, they saw a problem in the world that they thought that they could solve. And then by solving that problem, they created a business. And then they tried to continue to improve upon the problem that they were trying to solve, or branch out and solve other problems. And the byproduct of that were larger businesses. And then they ended up becoming labeled as entrepreneurs because they started growing all these businesses because they were trying to solve all these problems. It was never about the business or being an entrepreneur as the end result. The end result was creating impact, solving problems, and achieving a purpose. The business was the means to do that. The entrepreneur was the label that they got because they did that. And most people today become entrepreneurs because they want to become an entrepreneur, because they want to start a business, because they're looking for the status. And I would ask, well, what problem do you solve? That's great that you're an entrepreneur. That's great that you want to have $1 billion. What problem do you solve? What's your greater purpose? And that's the shift that you guys have made. That's the growth shift that entrepreneurs need to make today. Is it's not just about your status as an entrepreneur. It's not just about improving on your revenue and adding another zero to your ledger. It is about, what are the problems that you're solving? Who are you helping people become? And then how are you continuing to make things better for your brand, for all the people that touch it, those that work there, those that buy, those are your clients, your vendors, all of your stakeholders and shareholders. And then how does that trickle on beyond them? I love what you said about, if we could create these places, that number 78% keeps me up at night, that people go home, they're actively disengaged. They go home unhappy. I share this all the time. They go home and they give their leftovers to their families rather than giving their best to their families. They go home a worse version of themselves than a better version of themselves. Well, if we can reverse that, if we could create places where they come to work, right? They thrive, they grow, they're sharpened, they're appreciated, and then they go home and now they're the best version of themselves and they give the best to their families. Not only is their performance better at work, but now their performance is better at home. And as my friend Gary Ridge, former CEO of WD-40, says, when we create happy people at work, they create happy families, which creates happy communities, which then creates a happy world. The trickle effect of that, the upward spiral of that, is powerful. And yet so few embrace it.
And I also believe, though, going back in time, which I love to think about, right? You mentioned entrepreneurialism back, 50, 70, 100 years ago. But I also believe that great leaders in history did this stuff.
Yes.
We just didn't talk about it as loving and supportive and nurturing. I believe you go back in time and you start studying the great leaders. I believe they did these kinds of things. I mean, there's the one-off, nutball that drove the company at 150 miles an hour with a whip but that's the one-off stuff. I do believe that great leaders in history, they were doing this stuff.
Yeah. They just didn't label it. They didn't have to, because it wasn't the oddity. It wasn't the rarity. It was the norm. Yeah, but now it is the rarity. And so now we actually have to talk about it to get more people to embrace it, to make it the norm. So good. So good. Well, as we wrap up here, my friend, if there's one thought that you can leave for those listening today, that would help them on this journey that you've been on, maybe help them take that same journey, think about things a little bit differently, or just whatever it is that's going to help them step into the fullness of their purpose, individually, organizationally, as a leader, what would it be?
Well, I think that the transition in thinking that I would love to have in the world is a transition that we as leaders, the first thing we have to do is earn the respect of those that work with us and that are in our circle of care. And if we earn their respect, they'll allow us to lead them. And to me, that is some of the most powerful thinking out there, that as a leader, as somebody who has people within their circle of care, you have to earn their respect first, and then they'll allow you to lead them. And if you don't do that, you will never be able to lead people.
So good. So good. Man, I am so grateful for our time together. We're going to have to do another episode next year, because I could talk to you all day on this, and I really enjoyed this conversation. And you put out a lot of stuff like this. I know that you've been a guest on many, many podcasts. So for those who are listening today and they want more, because we could have covered so much more today, where can they follow you? Where can they find you?
Well, I've got a news feed on my website. Right now, the website is simply grindthebook.com. We're working on that to develop it into a larger brand. But you can also go to the Biggby website. There's a news feed on the Biggby website, and I'm pretty sure that every time I'm on an episode or do something in the world, it gets noted there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm so grateful for you. I'm thankful for the difference that you truly are leading in this world. The example that you're setting for the entrepreneurs of today, the entrepreneurs of tomorrow. Um, Thank you for the shift that you made from your head to your heart, how that is just exuding through the soon to be $1 billion brand that is Biggby Coffee, because you're loving people well and creating places where they can thrive and helping them design a life that they love. I just love that so much. It's been so much fun talking to you. I look forward to seeing you in the new year. I know we're going to get together. I hope we get to see each other at the Purpose Summit in May. And for those of you who are listening, we'll see you next time on the What Good Looks Like podcast.